The Nasdaq telling investors that its systems remain fully operational and new listings and IPOs will continue to go on. Joining us now, Adena Friedman, Nasdaq President and CEO. Now, normally we'd have Adena on set with us, but we're trying to be responsible and practice social distancing. So you notice we haven't had any reporters or guests on set with us today, and we have limited production crew around us. And that extends to everyone, including even the boss here at the Nasdaq. Adena, it is good to see you, nonetheless.
Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. What is the Nasdaq, you and the Nasdaq, how have you decided in terms of continuity through this, however long this takes?
Sure. Well, last night we made an announcement that tomorrow, effective tomorrow, we will be closing the PHLX floor. That's an options floor. And we are doing that specifically to make sure we're playing our role in the social distancing and to protect not only the people who are on the floor, but the communities that they operate in as well. But we, as an electronic market, across all the markets that we operate, we can operate our markets remotely. We do have, for the last couple of weeks, we've been instituting split teams and rotating teams, as well as encouraging our employees to work from home. For the market operations themselves, we do have teams, split team environment, and they can operate the markets remotely. Right now, we are still operating in a split team environment with certain people coming into the office and certain people working from home. But that is the benefit of the electronic markets that now exist in this country that allow us to manage our markets in a social distancing environment.
We've been talking a lot about the different infrastructure in both fixed income and in the equity markets. In terms of dislocations or things that aren't orderly or problem areas, what are you seeing at the Nasdaq?
Well, I think that in terms of the equities markets and the options markets, because they're so transparent and electronic, they're so connected, and every trade gets reported in real time, I do believe that we have seen certain momentary dislocations, but also a relatively orderly process of managing investor sentiment. The issue, of course, is that there is a supply and demand imbalance, and we are seeing that reflected in the markets in real time. I think in some of the other markets, the credit markets and the rates markets, the market structure is different. The level of liquidity needed is different. And as you can see, the Fed is taking action to manage the liquidity in the markets to make sure that they continue to function with the liquidity that's needed.
And we've been asking various people. We just asked the SEC commissioner about the possibility of ever closing the markets or a hiatus in trading. What would your feeling be on that? Most people say if there's a health issue, maybe you would do it, but it'd have to be a last resort.
Right. In our view, it is critically important that the markets continue to operate, that investors continue to be able to express themselves in the markets. But also, even last Thursday, during the very challenging markets we experienced, we did have a small healthcare company go public. And it is important, therefore, also to remember that the markets are there to give companies access to capital, particularly companies who are working with this virus and managing through this situation. Having access to capital on a ready basis is critically important to fund their operations. So we do believe that the capital markets should remain open throughout this process, and we will be here to make sure that we do our part to keep our markets open.
You had a new issue, but in general, how much has activity been hampered, and do we have how badly will the Nasdaq business be affected? What type of I guess you're going to have lower numbers than last year at the same time in the quarter. What type of decline are you looking at?
Well, in terms of IPOs, we've had 27 IPOs so far this year because we had a very fast start to the year. But we certainly are seeing companies now putting their IPOs on pause. They are still filed. We have actually the same number or a little bit more filings ready to go and waiting than we had last year. However, I do think that they obviously will be working with their underwriters and will be talking to investors to understand how receptive are they to coming out into the market in the coming weeks and months. We do obviously hope that if with the social distancing we're doing and all the work that the country is doing right now to manage through this crisis early, that we have an opportunity to continue to see if we have, we can kind of restart things as the year progresses. In terms of Nasdaq, we have a very resilient business model. We have a lot of annual and recurring revenues. The annual fees are paid in the beginning of the year. So for the listings that are on Nasdaq, and of course, trading volume does impact our revenues. So our business model is quite resilient in times like this.
Hey, Adena, I want to ask you just as a CEO, because the CEOs I've been talking to, some of them have said this is the most complicated thing they've ever tried to manage in terms of how do you figure out how to continue to run operations while you don't have people who are coming in? How do you do everything remotely? How has that kind of played out in your shop?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is we're a global business, so we use video conferencing and remote management on a regular basis. It's, of course, better to have teams together. It's, of course, better to have managers working with their teams collaboratively in the same location. However, we have managed through remote management in certain circumstances in the past. It is complicated. We start every day talking through our employees and making sure we're keeping our employees safe. We then move into the markets and manage through the market open and through the markets in these very volatile times. And then we finish the day planning for the next day. So it is definitely a complicated period, but we do believe that we're prepared. And we've had to manage through other shocks in the past that have made us much more prepared for this one.
We exit the set very quickly at 9 a.m. because we turn it back to the Nasdaq. And usually there's a big to-do in here. There's confetti. There's lots of people around. There's none of that right now. I wonder how long you see this situation last night. I know nobody knows, but when will we see someone enter our set? We're not really thrilled to have anyone come at this point.
Right.
We like that no one's been in here, but when do you see that loosening up, do you think?
Well, I think that right now we're making sure that we manage to a new environment for marking the market open and marking the market close with an event of some sort. We are working towards a remote event, so I think that we can try to continue to make sure that we mark the open and the close of the market. In terms of returning to any sort of sense of gathering, I think that that's anyone's guess at the moment. I think that right now the goal is to try to create social distancing, to flatten the curve, and manage through this situation so that we can actually come back into a more normal environment as quickly as possible.
Adena, you talk to a lot of other CEOs because of your unique business line and being in contact with so many of them. I've been, I guess, surprised at how quickly this is developing, changing not on a day-by-day basis, but basically an hour-by-hour basis. What do you hear from those CEOs without giving away any conversations you've actually had with them? What's the overall sense that you've gotten?
Well, it really depends on the industry. So I have actually spoken with a lot of CEOs, and depending on the industry, they can be just completely impacted in every part of their business, or they're yet to really see the impact to their business. So if you're in a B2B software business and you have a very steady and stable revenue stream, you're likely to feel pretty good about the recurring revenue that you have in your market, in your model, but you may not be able to get new clients to focus on that part right now. Whereas if you're in, obviously, the hospitality or travel industry, you are just materially impacted in every element of your business. So it really does depend on the industry. The other thing I have heard is supply chain issues are starting to manifest themselves depending on the industry and depending on how much they're reliant on other parts of the world to manage their supply chains. But we are going to start to see that filter into the economy in the coming weeks.